So hello everyone and welcome back to Next Gen's Enhancing Your Vision in 2020 webinar series. Tonight's topic is on navigating challenges and being courageous in chaos. We are joined by our wonderful panel of extraordinary individuals who have faced a diverse range of chaotic scenarios this year and have encountered different obstacles throughout their journey while navigating them. We are joined by Alex Morgan from Move Pilates Studio, Peri Strathearn from Murraylands News, and Rebecca Hewings from the Bridges Events Centre. For anyone who is new to NextGen and doesn't know much about us, NextGen is a networking group based in the Murraylands and Riverland region. We are focused on empowering individuals and businesses through the influence of knowledge sharing. Our region has access to a wealth of knowledge and capabilities, and we want NextGen to act as a channel for individuals to learn and grow. NextGen is an initiative of Regional Development Australia, Murraylands and Riverlands, and is supported by the rural city of Mowbridge. My name is Catherine and I'm a project officer at Regional Development Australia, Murraylands and Riverlands, and I'm also joined in the background by my co-host Kate Winke from the rural city of Mowbridge and Annalise Gates from Regional Development Australia, Murraylands and Riverlands. The Enhancing Your 2020 Vision series is a four-part webinar series. We are running over the month of July. This series is focused on looking at reflecting on not only what we can learn from the last 6 months, but also checking with how we can be more effective in what we do. Tonight, we are pretty much doing exactly that. We are asking our wonderful panelists that you can see on the screen in a minute what challenges they've been thrown this year and how they've managed to navigate them, and more so what they've learnt from those challenges too. We have already had a chat with Courtney from ComShake Media Engagement on effective marketing and communication strategies, as well as Adrian from Collaborative Employment Solutions on business development and planning. If you have missed these chats, they are available for viewing on our YouTube platform. Next week, we will be hosting our final webinar of the series on the topic of leading with influence and impact in the new era of leadership. So this will be presented by Tamsin Simmons and Amy Springhall from The Edge Communication and Leadership. I do encourage anyone to use the chat box below as we go. We will be monitoring it throughout, and I'll try my best to integrate them in throughout the discussion. And if so, we'll also have a question and answer session at the end. Before we do kick off on tonight's discussion, I would like to formally introduce each of our panelists. I won't go into too much detail as I'll have them tell us a little bit about themselves as well. I'll get everyone to give us a little wave on the screen as I introduce you all as well. So in alphabetical order, we have Alex Morgan. So Alex is the studio owner at Move Pilates Studio. Her business just celebrated its 4th year during that time, she has managed to lead a team of, is it 6 amazing instructors? So yeah, so she leads a team there. And during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we all know that a lot of the fitness studios were largely affected, and this seen Alex actually flip her Pilates studio into a production studio for at-home virtual Pilates classes. So next we have Peri Strathearn. Peri is the managing editor at Mowbridge News. We know that print media and journalism has faced some pretty tough hits in recent years, and many of them have become more noticeable during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So in April, Peri took his fate into his own hands and started the Mowbridge News, which is a digital local news platform. He showed courage and perseverance by not letting any obstacle prevent him from doing the job he loves. And finally, we have Rebecca Hewings. So Rebecca is the functions coordinator at the Bridges Events Centre. As we all know, when restrictions fastened, the events and service industries, they took a pretty heavy hit. They are still recovering and facing regular challenges, and the concept of being thrown curveballs unexpectedly it's not actually probably that foreign to event managers. So Rebecca will provide a really interesting perspective that I'm looking forward to listening to around what it's like to face challenges when you have no control over them and you just have to keep on keeping on. So yes, welcome to our wonderful panel.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Beautiful. So to start off, I do want to ask you all to tell us a little bit about yourself and your career, and maybe one of the toughest challenges or decisions that you've ever had to make. That can be maybe not only this year, but in your life. So maybe if we start with Alex, and if you could tell us a bit about yourself, and then we'll go in alphabetical order again.
Yeah, so I'm Alex. I have 2 young children and I own the Pilates studio. As you said, we've been open for 4 years and it's just kind of gradually evolved within that 4 years. My background was health, but in a different perspective. I come from a dentistry background. And that's how I fell into Pilates. I was in my final year of uni and just suffering with a lot of pain through my shoulder. If you've ever been to the dentist, you know that we don't sit well. And so found that really, really challenging. And it brought up a lot of concerns about how I was actually going to practice coming out of uni and what my career would look like. So I fell into Pilates as a bit of a rehab and preventative to support dentistry. And then I went on and I had my first baby and I came back to work and then pretty quickly fell pregnant again. So knew that I was going to be taking a longer time off of work and wanted a bit of a creative outlet to do while I wasn't practicing. So just started to study Pilates, just thinking I would do it for myself and maybe some friends in my Bagola. And it just kind of organically grew from there. We're still kind of in my backyard, but the Pilates side of it has changed. We've transitioned from more of a mat style Pilates to more of a machine style Pilates. And yeah, it's just kind of evolved over the last 4 years. There's never really been a plan, which would have been really handy during COVID, but we're just making it up as we go along, I think. Challenge-wise, I think it is... as my business grew, it grew really quickly, and I don't come from a business background. So it was trying to make decisions in the moment, you know, not knowing what the next 6 months was going to look like. And then I came to a pivotal point where I had to pick dentistry or Pilates because I just couldn't do both with a young family. And I was just really, really pulled to Pilates just because I viewed it as a bit more of a preventative aspect on health. The dentistry I was practicing was with the government, and we were seeing really young children with just such severe health conditions going on, and we were kind of seeing them at their end point, and the things we had to do were quite drastic. And I've always wanted to be on the other end and being a bit more of a preventative perspective and having that positive control over someone's health at the beginning rather than at that end point. And I just found that Pilates has been able to fulfill that for me. I hope to go back to dentistry part-time at some point, but not at the detriment of Pilates. It's just become too important to me. So yeah, kind of it.
Very fantastic. I love that in a way Pilates kind of came about from a little bit of a challenge that was thrown at you as well at the time. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. Peri, do you want to please let us know a bit about yourself now?
Yes, so my name's Peri. I had a lot of different jobs in my early 20s, like 15 or more, but eventually came into journalism, and I was a newspaper journalist for just about 10 years with the company that used to be Fairfax Media. I spent most of that time with the Murray Valley Standard here in Murray Bridge. And yes, obviously this year has been a challenging one for regional media, would be probably putting it pretty mildly. Regional media is already, or has already been in a tricky spot for kind of 5 or 10 years, really. But this year, when we were told we were going to be shutting down for 10 weeks, and I was looking down the barrel of 10 weeks, potentially without JobKeeper either. We didn't know if we were going to get it or not. I didn't know if I'd have a job to go back to or not. And so I took matters into my own hands rather quickly, probably too quickly, but anyway, look, here we are. Basically, I found out on the 14th of April that I would be stood down on the 20th of April, and I launched my website on the 23rd of April. And so far, so good. I'm now running Murraybridge News, this website, which publishes an email newsletter that goes out to just over 1,000 people every week, and puts out 2 or 3 stories every weekday, and has so far a few hundred people who have signed up to be paying subscribers for $5 a month. And so, look, I'm not rich and I'm certainly busy, but it's more appealing than sitting around.
Wonderful, and I will definitely revisit that as well, as I think that that is a challenge that, you know, many people are probably facing in times of uncertainty at the moment. So yes, we'll definitely revisit that one with you too, Peri. Rebecca, what about yourself?
I'm Rebecca. I work for Bridges Events Centre as well as the Murraybridge Racing Club. I'm originally from the UK, so I've been in Australia for 4.5 years. I'll be 5 in December, which is very exciting. I went to university and studied events management, and that's what I've been in ever since I've come out. So that's pretty exciting. Worked in lots of different places, mainly corporate hotels has been my background. But then I took the leap of faith of coming over to South Australia to try and open a brand new facility with horse racing, which isn't my forte, but I'm learning pretty quickly. And to try and open a regional event centre in Murraybridge, which I didn't know anything about a year ago, but I'm quickly learning about Murraybridge and the surrounds, and trying to get regional events happening in Bridges Event Centre, which is quite a challenge in itself, but it's an exciting one. It's definitely exciting. But yeah, other than that, I think my toughest challenge. Are you going to ask me that question, or should I say that now?
You can go for it if you want.
I can wait. I can wait.
Beautiful. Well, while we are actually on you, Beck, I do actually just want to lead off of what you just then mentioned then as well, around the whole entering of a completely unfamiliar environment or a completely unfamiliar industry. I think that that's something that lots of people get quite hesitant around when it does come to, I guess, a little bit more of a dramatic job change. And I think that that also connects back to a question that Annalise just asked for Alex as well, which I'll get you to speak to a little bit too, Alex. But yeah, I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit on, I guess, what actually was that drive and how you overcome that initial fear of the that, will I be able to do this job effectively? Do you want to speak to that for a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I mean, I was sort of a couple of years of the jobs I've been in, working in hotels is very reactive. So a lot of people just inquire and you get the events coming to you, and you don't actually have to work that hard to get the new events. So yeah, the job came up, and I was looking, as much as I love Queensland, I was like, well, I don't know how long I can stay in Australia for. I'm always on a time limit. I'm always on a visa. So the opportunity came up to come to South Australia, and I thought, why not? I could be leaving next year. Let's go and see what the other half of part of Australia looks like. So I took it. They did ask me, obviously, in interviews, what do you know about racing? England does have quite a prominent racing industry, particularly Newmarket, which is where my family's from. So I could tell a little bit about it, but it's not up to scratch. And as everyone will find out on a race day when they try and ask me, oh, which horse to back, or blah, blah, I just say, if it's got a good name or if it's a McAvoy horse, you probably got good odds at a winning horse. But the leap of faith was, I just don't think many people in my position, particularly in a country which I'm not from, I'm on a visa, so it's also very risky for the employer as well to take me on. But to open a venue, a brand new venue, trying to give it the like the stature that it's built on for a club that's over 100 years old, that's moved to, like I say, this brand new building, and the expectation of, I guess, what it had on Murraylands and Riverlands, of this huge facility that's being put in, it is very daunting. And it's still, to this day, even though I've been there a year, I do feel a lot of pressure to, succeed and make sure that there are events coming in, and to show that I'm actively trying to get events in. It's daily, it's a challenge, but I like to think I'm succeeding quite well at it at the moment.
No, that's really interesting to hear, because I think sometimes when a challenge does arrive, you kind of just have to jump in and keep on taking that challenge as it comes, and you don't really know what the next curve will be that it throws you, but you just kind of keep taking them as they come to you. Alex, I do wonder if you could just speak to Annalise's question just for a little bit too. Annalise just asked in the chat box how Alex actually decided to choose pursuing a business over a secure employment role. I think that is another really big factor that comes into when people look at taking on new jobs or going out on their own, is the secure employment. It's a massive challenge to think around that.
Yeah, I guess there was no real decision at the start, because I was always taking a break from my job role to go on maternity leave, and I had left the door that I was going to be gone for 12 months. So I never had to kind of quit my job role at the start, because I think anyone that, starts a business willingly knows that the first couple of years are not pretty. So having to make that decision straight up would have been a little bit scary. But I had my maternity leave, and the business organically grew while I was on maternity leave. I just started running 2 classes a week, and then I had my son, and I went back to teaching classes within a couple of months. So I think I was back running classes after 2 months, and then demand just kind of gradually and organically grew, that it went from 2 classes to 4 classes, and it just kind of continued growing. At the end of my maternity leave, I actually went back. So there was a point probably towards the first and second year of Pilates that I was doing both. So I was at the dental clinic 2 days a week and running Pilates. And it was just getting unenjoyable. I was being pulled in like many, many different directions. And then I would get home and just be exhausted. And with a young family, like, kids don't really care if you're tired. So home life was starting to suffer a little bit. So it was more my home life and that lack of balance that actually made me decide, like, what direction am I going to go? And then I started looking, like, I didn't really look at it from an employment security. I just looked at it like, what gives me the most enjoyment at this particular stage. And being self-employed does have its, little benefits of flexibility and being, able to run classes on my terms and things like that. So I think because of the kids' age and the flexibility, that's why I chose Pilates, not necessarily from a financial perspective. But I guess I'm fortunate. My particular position in the dental clinic, because we're rural, it's incredibly hard to fill. We get new dental grads coming down from Adelaide that last for a year and then go back to Adelaide because they don't want to travel. So that door is kind of always a little open for me if I want to go back. So I feel like I haven't had to completely shut it, which has made the decision to pursue, business ownership and that a little easier, because I feel like there are other options if, COVID 2.0 hit again and I needed to financially make some different decisions for my family.
Fantastic. And I think that's again, like, really interesting, and you did bring up something around the whole work-life balance, which I will actually come back and revisit that later on. I do just have a question for you at the moment though, Alex, that I am really keen to hear. And I remember having a chat with you at the beginning of COVID-19 when restrictions were pretty much at their tightest. You said to me how fast you actually flipped your normal bricks and mortar style Pilates studio classes into your virtual classes. I think it happened within a week. You just completely flipped how your business was operating. And I do really want to ask you, because you did mention around how you were driven to ensure that all your staff stayed on during this time. And I was wondering if you could actually speak briefly about your experience and how important communication and leadership was to you and also your staff during that time. How did you find navigating that space as a boss?
Challenging. No, I have like a really incredible team, and I think that's what made COVID so stressful. Just going like, not only did I feel responsible for myself, I was responsible for 6 other people, and I know them so well and I know their families, and I just found the gravity of that situation terrifying. My personality is planning, and I know I previously said I didn't have a business plan and I've never had a structure, but I always kind of in the back of my mind think, you know, what's coming around the corner, and did not see COVID coming around the corner. I had literally just written a business plan and a business continuity plan, which was, you know, if our computer broke, we would do this, and if this happened, but never did I think that our physical doors would be closed, and there was no real plan for that. We were probably able to flip really quickly because I could just see what was happening interstate, and it was just escalating day by day. And then I looked within our studio, and we see a lot of elderly clients. Like the majority of our clients are women in their 60s, 70s. We have some 80-year-olds. And then on the flip side, we see women that are pregnant and, you know, people that have young families. And my son has asthma. So we started asking ourselves, like, yes, we can legally stay open, but morally, like, where do we want to sit in this? And, you know, if we were to play a part in making someone unwell, how would that sit with us? So we were able to flip because we already had in the back of our mind that we were probably gearing up to close before we were forcibly closed down. So I think that's why we were able to transition so quickly, because we were already headed in that direction. Running a mat studio is how I started. So the mat Pilates and whatnot wasn't an issue for us. The tech was a big issue because we're not very tech savvy at all. So that was probably our biggest issue was, you know, our tech and making sure our power didn't randomly go out and things like that. But the decision to flip was quick, and it was more driven by, I think, the well-being of our clients, but also like, you know, being able to provide something for my staff to go like, I'm trying, you know, like I know we can't do this, but let's do this instead, just to give them a little bit of hope that we weren't just kind of rolling with the punches and waiting for things to happen to us. We wanted to be a bit more proactive about our situation and try and offer them a bit of security and positivity in a really shitty time.
Yeah, great. But leading off of Alex there as well, because we were kind of talking a little bit around communication and how important that was for her team, I did just want to come back to you to ask a little bit around communication in the events industry. It is obviously a very heavy teamwork environment that you work in. And, you know, with it being such perishable in nature, and if a challenge does arise, it has to be dealt with then and there in a really fast and efficient manner. So because of this, I'd love your perspective a little bit on how important to find that internal communication process and your transparency in your workplace and industry when you overcome those challenges. And, you know, maybe do you have any tips on how people can communicate effectively between teams?
I don't know if I have tips as such, but one thing that I would definitely say is sharing as much information as you can with your staff is so vital. Like you say, they're the core. Like, you can only tell them what to do, but they're the ones that actually are there on the front lines. They're dealing with the customers face to face. So yeah, sharing as much information I just think is key, and being as transparent as possible is also so important. So particularly through COVID, obviously we shut down the event centre pretty much on the 23rd of March when they said everything's going into lockdown. So immediately I'm telling the staff, this is what happened. I'm sure you're all aware that because it was all over the news and everything. I'm not quite sure when we're going to be open, but I'll keep you updated as much as I can. Obviously, if you find work in the meantime, great, but I'll keep you on the books, you know, for when we can open again if you're keen to. And they're all very, very appreciative. I mean, a majority of my staff are young. So I'd say they're probably in the bracket of maybe 18 to 24. So they are trying to, you know, get into the workplace, be it in hospitality or somewhere else, and we're just a starting platform for them. So they were really keen and happy to hear the information that I kept providing to them. So I do think it's really important just to keep them happy as well, because again, unhappy staff can be very, very challenging. And I want them obviously to be happy in the workplace so that, yeah, they're happy with the customers. But challenges, because I know one of the things you asked me was dealing with difficulties and how you tackle issues that come up on a day-to-day event basis. But I guess my process would be to tackle it there and then, because we are, whether it's a race day or an event, you don't want the customer to go home and be unsatisfied with the outcome, or still having to come back and revisit the issue that occurred on the day.
Yeah.
So I definitely, in my mindset, it's address it straight away. How can I make things better? Let's make you happy and smile within the next 10 minutes. Otherwise, yeah, you're going to go with a negative mindset and you may not return. And word of mouth is so important, particularly for like a brand new venue, to know that they can come and Bridges is successful and you can put an event on there and leave happy and come back. So yeah, I think
yeah, definitely. And I think you know, a large part that you talked about there was honesty with your staff and in your teams, and how much of a value that is to have those honest conversations. But then at the same time, a lot of the space that you deal with, you know, there is no separation between the actual service that you're producing and also that receiving. So, you know, you do just have to face it as it comes and figure it out as you go. Peri, we have just heard from Alex and Beck a little bit both about communication within teams internally, but I do want to shift the question around into a little bit more of a journalism space for a bit, and just kind of ask you about how important transparency and communication is when you're navigating problems with individuals or businesses who are needing you for that external communication out to their clients.
Very important, very important. Something that I learned in my previous job is to have a policy of no surprises, especially if there's going to be bad news that you're delivering to someone. If you're going to write, in the journalism context, obviously, if you're going to write a story that's going to upset someone, then ring them up beforehand and say, look, this is the story that's going to come out. This is what you're going to hear. You know, give people an opportunity to put their side of the story as well. I've had a couple this week which have been challenging. One story because I wrote it up and had it ready to go, and a PR person with the organisation I was writing about said, no, this isn't in the marketing plan, you can't do it, just wait for us to send you a press release in 2 months' time and you can write about it then. And I'm going, well, hang on, I know it's not part of the plan, but you know, it's my job to write about what's going on. And then the other person was, the other story that was challenging this week actually involved legal threats, the person saying, I will sue you if you put this story out. And which is, you know, something that happens as a journalist. And in both cases, I think it was a matter of, when I first spoke to the aggrieved people, this was the first they'd heard of it, that either I was ringing them and this was the first they'd heard of it, or they'd just found out and got on the phone to me straight away, and they were cranky and they needed to vent, and that's great. And you let that person vent, and then maybe you send them an email and explain a bit more, and then have a chat the next day. And as long as you're not, blowing people out of the water with something they didn't expect was coming, as long as you're keeping everyone updated, then I think you can manage relationships a lot more harmoniously. And I mean, transparency and communication is important with everyone who might be a stakeholder or a client or involved in your business anyway. I think that, it's business these days isn't so much about, here's what I'm offering, take it or leave it, is it? It's much more like, okay, this is some ideas I have, how can you work with, what can I do? How can I modify this to suit your needs a bit better? Or do you have any ideas of services I can offer or things I can do that might be good for you? It's a lot more of a two-way street these days. And thankfully with social media and with Zoom, obviously, there are ways to facilitate it a lot more easily than we've been able to in the past.
Yeah, great. Something that you touched on just there as well was really around that kind of stakeholder engagement that you have within your job. And that was actually something that I was really interested in asking yourself and also Beck later on too. So I will just bring it in now. Both of your lines of work does actually involve you guys dealing with lots of businesses quite frequently, and I'm sure that as much as you do love all of your clients, there is so much working with different entities and third parties and businesses that I'm sure in amongst all that stakeholder engagement, there is a certain degree of conflict. So I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate a little bit on what it is like working through challenges with those clients when there is that kind of power dynamic and all that come into play as well. Like, what is your recommendation on the best approach or question to approach those types of challenging situations? Peri, do we want to start with you?
Sure. I mean, for one thing, I'm very fortunate in that subscribers, readers form a good part of my revenue. Look, I'm not making heaps of money, but the fact that my readers are probably the majority of the money that I'm making helps me to focus on their needs first, which is very good. But obviously, I still do need to deal with advertising clients, which is something that's almost completely new to me. And has been a real learning experience. But for the most part, I think what I've found so far is that, if you're upfront and honest with people about what you can and can't do, whether it's timelines or whether it's products you can offer, services you can offer, then, and then you just keep communicating, keep in touch with people, maybe I can't do it tomorrow, but I can do it the next day. I think as long as you are honest and keep those lines of communication open, you'll do okay, or at least touch wood, I have done so far.
Beautiful. And what about yourself, Beck? How do you find navigating those challenging situations that you might have with your clients?
A bit like what Peri said, it's important to keep the communication there, keep it apparent, because we could, for example, I can get inquiries. Say I got 5 inquiries today, but I've actually been dealing with a conference this morning, and I need to keep telling them, even if I email, just say, I acknowledge your inquiry, but unfortunately I can't get round to it today, but it will be a priority tomorrow. A lot of people do appreciate just that acknowledgement that, okay, you've read my email, but thank you for letting me know, and you'll get back to me tomorrow. It's the littlest things, but a lot of people do really, really appreciate just the acknowledgement that you've heard them. And that you will get back to them tomorrow. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess it does come down a little bit to knowing, those limitations and setting it out and, having those conversations as well. Peri, I would love to come back and chat a little bit to you about your experience early this year. So you did face a really daunting challenge that so many individuals, not only within our region but across Australia, are unfortunately facing the reality of, and that was that you were stood down at your job from the local paper. I have actually heard around many publications, especially print, doing it really tough, not just now but for many years, and this has been a challenge that many businesses or individuals have struggled to pioneer through. So whilst not everyone listening in to this webinar will be exactly going through this type of challenge directly, I am wondering if you could speak for a minute to the experience of people that encounter challenges that seem to only be going one way, and there doesn't seem to be any other option, that, you know, you feel like you're going down into a really deep, dark hole. So what would your advice for them be, where there seems to be nothing left to do? You know, was there some triggering thought that made you say, I'm just going to give this possibility or this opportunity my all and hope for the best? Was there something there?
I think if you're in a situation where, I don't know if it's fair to say that the newspaper industry is terminal, maybe not quite yet, maybe very slowly terminal, but if you're in a situation where decline is obvious and it's ongoing, then you need to have an escape plan. When I moved to Murray Bridge in 2012, I was working in a newspaper office that had kind of 20 to 25 people working in it, production team, sales team, you know, half a dozen journalists and photographers and all sorts of different people, 3 admins. And when I left, there were 4 other people in the office, of whom 2 were doing jobs that weren't actually for the Standard. They were for the company statewide, happened to be working in Murray Bridge. And so that decline was fierce and obvious right throughout the time that I was there. One of my career goals, I didn't know where I was going to go in my next role, but I knew that I didn't want to work at a one-person paper. I'd had that experience a couple of times and didn't enjoy it. And yes, in the end, by February of 2019, I was the last journo at the paper anyway. And so, you know, I spent a year doing that and thought, this isn't what I wanted, really. You know, I might have liked to be the editor of a country paper by now in some alternate reality in which that was still possible. But that role doesn't exist anymore. ACM, which owns the Standard these days, has 1 editor for 16 papers across South Australia. And that's not the same role as you think of a newspaper editor in a small town having. So the challenge, Alex talked earlier about how it was really helpful that she didn't have to quit her day job right away. And although the timeline was a lot shorter for me, I did kind of have the same thing in that there was this 10-week shutdown, and, you know, potentially, most likely, there was a good chance I was going to have a job to go back to at the end of that. But certainly for 10 weeks, I was basically free to do whatever I wanted. We have to get permission to do any other work. It's in our employment contracts. And I rather cheekily just said to my boss, oh, I'm thinking of doing some freelance writing for a little while. And he said, oh, okay. What are you going to do? Oh, we'll see, I said, sort of having my plans sort of halfway thought out already. I think the key to overcoming this challenge of starting my own business and doing what I've done in the past few months was just being prepared for it. I think that I wouldn't say I was completely prepared. I wasn't ready, but having daydreamed about something like this for a couple of years, and just, you know, every time I come across something that, you know, it might be a story or like an industry article, or it might be some advice, just jot it all down, file it away somewhere. And particularly that includes the discovery of Substack, the web platform, which I use for my website. I came across that in January, and that was really one of the things that clicked and went, all right, that's going to be really handy if I need to do this one day. And a few months later, of course, the opportunity rolled around, and it's daunting to think, all right, are we going to do this? But there comes a point, if you're facing a challenge, where, you know, if you're unprepared, you're going to feel it, you're going to know it. But if you're prepared and just, you know, scared to death, then, you know, maybe it's time to take that leap and just give it a red hot go.
Do you think that there was also that little bit of a question around, you know, what's the worst that will happen if I do just do this? Like, what is the worst case scenario? Is it really that bad, or is the reward for it far exceed the worst case scenario?
Yeah, that's very fair to say. I think that I saw that, you know, there would be a chance that maybe I'd just have 10 weeks off. I'd write some stuff on a website for free. It'd keep me out of trouble for 10 weeks, and then I'd go back to my normal job. But the flip side is that maybe if the newspaper shut down, maybe I didn't have a job to go back to, in which case, what am I going to do? This is in a situation where we too have 2 young girls under 5. My wife was only working 2 days a week at the time. So we were in strife. We needed to do something. And I was ready and willing to go back to retail if I needed to. I'll do Nightfield if I needed to. But I thought, well, let's try this thing, see what the interest is like. And the interest so far has been pretty positive.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that story, Peri. I do think that it is really interesting to think, because it is something that a lot of people do experience, or they do generally experience at some stage in their life, whether it's during their early career or later in their career. Alex, I do want to come back to you now. You are a mother, a business owner, a leader of an amazing team, and you've got your Move community behind you. Before COVID-19 hit, you were actually lined up to be our Next Gen's featured guest at our March networking event, and you were going to speak a little bit on wellness and work-life balance. So I wouldn't be optimizing the opportunity that I have to have you chatting with us right now if I didn't ask you this. But I would really love to know how you managed to balance all of the challenges and the chaos of work, life, family. How do you navigate it all? I will just add in before you do answer that though, because I did actually read a really interesting article once that considered work-life balance as actually work-life Jenga. It's because it's more rather around that strategic element of just trying to keep everything stable without it all falling apart. So I wanted to know if you kind of consider if there is an element of Jenga to this, I guess, never-ending challenge, really. Like, is it a matter of prioritizing the actions that will keep you the most stable, or is there a method to your ability to conquer this all?
No, there's no method. I see mine more like juggling, and sometimes it works and other times all the balls hit me at the same time. So it just depends, and it can change like from day to day as well. I think I've learned a lot, you know, like obviously going from employment where I was just at the dental clinic 3 days a week. My start time was 8:30, my finish time was 4:30, and I was done for the day. I went from that structure to working at home where I didn't have those confines and I didn't have those times. Obviously, I had times that I had to be in the studio, but then there's all the other stuff. And I was finding that I was just up late at night doing the other stuff, or, you know, the kids would be sitting next to me and I'd be on my computer and just not like even aware to the situation, what's happening around me. And it was my husband going like, this is really crap. Like, you're either at work or you're doing work here and you just like, you need to work this out a bit better. And he wasn't saying it to be me, but just going like, I don't even think you realize this is what is happening. So it's taken a lot of trial and error, and I still don't know if there is a perfect formula or a perfect balance. Sometimes, you know, I spend a lot more time with my family and I dip into work a smaller amount, and then the following week it's a bit more work focused. So I think eventually it balances, but I don't think there is a perfect balance each week. Well, for me, I just haven't found it yet. Probably the biggest thing for me has been learning to not do all of the tasks myself. I've really, really enjoyed over the last year or so upskilling the team that I work with and going, you know, recognizing the talents and skills they have. And there's so many things they're just so much better at than me. So it's giving them that little bit of training or seeing what they need to be able to take on those particular tasks and then kind of remove that from my plate a little bit. That is probably over the last 12 months what's changed a lot for me, and it's become just so much more enjoyable rather than Peri at the start was saying, you know, like Twitter and Facebook, and like I can't sit at a computer and schedule social media. It's just not something that comes naturally to me. I prefer to do face-to-face conversation. So when I was doing our social media, it'd be a bit like, oh God, we haven't posted in 2 weeks. Like, let me write something there. Now, one of our instructors, she just loves it and she's so passionate about it, and she gets into the studio and she talks to everyone, and you can just see she really loves it. So it just seems absolutely pointless for me to be trying to do it when there's someone so much better at it and willing to do it. So I'm finding a lot more enjoyment in doing that and then keeping the tasks that I genuinely really, really enjoy. And for me, that's been getting back into teaching more and more face-to-face and kind of offloading some of the admin a little bit.
I do actually love that you brought up around delegation, as I think that's actually one of my biggest challenges is learning how to delegate. It's something that, you know, comes into that element of control. Like when you start to delegate something off, you no longer have that control, and it's such a challenge to kind of come to terms with not having control over a situation or something. So I actually wanted to ask Beck a little bit about control as well. So I will shift it to Beck and actually ask you, because in the events industry, sometimes you just don't have control over a situation that does happen. So I wonder, how do you go with, you know, overcoming that challenge, like any challenges that you can't control, things that just happen?
It depends what the challenge is, I suppose.
Let's use COVID-19, for example. That was an absolute challenge that I don't think anyone has any control over.
No. So yeah, unfortunately for me, I think that COVID-19, well, and for the club, it just came at really the wrong time. And I mean, there's no right time for it to arrive, but for us, being a new business, you know, it's our 1 year anniversary, our first birthday on the 10th of August. And it felt like we were just starting to get our name out there. Inquiries were becoming quite regular. We'd had a lot of inquiries or events that had confirmed between March and now, which have either cancelled or they have postponed, which is great. So we've still got them. But yeah, it was just really, really hard. Like we had our first wedding booked in for October and we were like super excited. That's now been postponed to April. And it's all out of our control. But the only thing that I can control, the part of it is going back to communication, which we've touched on numerous times already, but is keeping the client aware of what the restrictions are that are in place for us in the event centre and our capacity and what we're doing as an event centre to keep the place safe and what they can assure their guests that we're doing. So when they come here, they can feel, you know, not anxious. We have got sanitizer everywhere. We can social distance because we're a large venue, which we are very fortunate to have. And I would say that although COVID-19 has been detrimental to all the event industry and people in general, the whole world, being a large event centre, those events that people are so insistent on having and want to put on, whether it's a private function or whether it's a corporate function, which they do want to hold, we have been able to take a couple of events that now can't hold their event in the venue that they previously were going to, just because they cannot have the capacity under the 2 square metre rule and the 1.5 social distancing. So we have had a little bit of luck in that respect. And also, if I touch on the Murray Bridge racing side of things, we have been able to still horse race through the entire COVID. Spectators haven't been able to attend, but we've been restricted just to horse essential personnel, because obviously horses do still need to exercise and things. So we have been quite fortunate in that respect. But yeah, COVID, biggest challenge, definitely the biggest challenge. But I feel like we've communicated well with our clients, and they are still going to hold their events with us.
No, that's great. And I think one of the key things that you kind of touched on a little bit there as well is, you know, if you can't control something, look for those things that you can control and take control of those things. And, you know, it's all that you can do in some challenging situations. So I think that was, I think that's a really great response to how to deal with control. So we are unfortunately running out of time and coming to the end of our discussion. I do invite anyone who is listening in to and has a question to just pop them down in the little chat box. And while anyone who does have a question types away, I do just have 2 more questions to ask before we finish up. So I would just love to know one thing from all of you that you have learnt this year. It can be from COVID-19, or it can be any other challenge that you faced. And I just want to know something around, you know, how you might use that as you move into the future. It's a tough question. I'll start with Alex.
Yeah.
Start with Peri. Peri looks like he's got an answer.
What I've learned this year is that people are nice. Like, people are actually pretty great. I have been, quite humbled by the level of support that I've had for my little enterprise, whether it's people becoming a paying subscriber or whether it's just people sending their well wishes on Facebook or whatever it might be. People are pretty good. I don't know if that's a lesson, but that's something that I've found over the past few months.
I love that. I think that it's great. You know, everyone does go through challenges, and it goes back to that communication, that people are understanding. They're quite kind and everything. So as long as you're being honest and communicating to them, people will understand. So I think that's great.
And especially in a community like the one we're in, people will back a local.
Yeah, fantastic. Alex, did you have anything to share?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just having a plan, probably becoming a little bit more of a structured planner, but then having the ability or the innovation behind it to go like, this is my plan. If it doesn't go to that plan, here's an idea, and just having that little bit of flexibility to move. Obviously, COVID is an extreme version of it, but it's just been a really nice but challenging lesson that, you know, things will not go. This is definitely, I don't think any of us saw 2020 going this way or starting off this year, but it is a nice little lesson going, you know, it's not always going to be smooth sailing, and you shouldn't settle into that mindset of like, oh, this is what I'm just going to do now. You do kind of need to be on your toes and constantly forward thinking, just in case, or looking for another idea to improve your business. So definitely looking for a little bit more innovation, I think, for the rest of 2020 and maybe into next year.
Great. And yourself, Rebecca?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with what Peri and Alex said. But I think for me is probably just sharing more information as much as I can with clients or prospective clients, and just keeping them up to date with what we can do at the event centre. You know, the type of events we can hold. I guess it's just a marketing strategy that there is still competition even in this unprecedented time. I don't know what other word to say. I know we've heard that word so many times. But I think, just knowing that there's still competition out there, but there is still people that are looking for events. And although it is sort of nervous to ask people to spend the money to put on an event, there are still people that are willing to do it. So I don't think you can ever just sit back and just think that things are going to get back to normal. I think you've always got to be a bit proactive and like plan and just make sure that you're ready when everything is back to normal, I suppose.
Yeah, fantastic. Last question, and this is one of my favourite questions to hear from people, which is why I am going to squeeze it in and still ask it. And that's how you actually define success. I think that this is a really great question to ask people, because it really challenges all of our own perceptions on how success looks in life and did work. So I'd just love to know, in a short answer from you, it can just be one thing on either life, career, business, or family. But yeah, how do you define success? I'll start with Peri.
Sure. I think that it's good to set goals and try to achieve them, and that can help you understand whether you're on the right track or not. But I don't think that's necessarily the be all and end all either. I think that if you're doing something you love, and if you're not living in the gutter, and if your family life is pretty good, I think you're succeeding, really, in the scheme of things.
Oh, beautiful. And what about yourself, Rebecca?
Well, I think with everything that's happened so far in 2020, I think health, being healthy is pretty successful in life. But I think having a good work-life balance is really, really important in it. And just knowing that every day is just so, what's the word I'm looking for? It's so uncertain. That to just, make sure you've got a plan and everything is going to be okay.
No, great. And Alex?
Yeah, so mine is just always the very small wins that you see within your week. Like success to me this week looked like one of our 80-year-old clients could get on the ground with her granddaughter, which she hasn't been able to do in years. And to me, like, if you had to sum up, it's just going like, we've made a positive change in this woman's life. That is success to us. But then going home and, like, you know, being there for when my children go to bed and being able to teach my daughter to read, that is success, being home and having that balance between the two. So for me, it's not a very big thing. It's just seeing those small wins within your days and going like, you know what, like, things are going to plan. This is going pretty well. Yeah.
I think if you're making yourself useful to other people, then that's succeeding.
Yeah, correct.
No, brilliant. Well, that was absolutely wonderful to hear. So thank you, Alex, Peri, and Rebecca, for joining us and sharing your knowledge and insights on navigating challenges. I have definitely found your answers incredibly insightful, and I'm sure that everyone who tuned in tonight and also is watching this back has too. As I mentioned at the beginning, and I will just share my screen again, we are going to be joined next week for our final webinar by the wonderful ladies at the Edge Communications and Leaderships, and they will be talking to us on leading with influence and impact in the new era of leadership. So as a little bit of insights, Tamsin is a leadership and behavioural strategist. She has been helping Australia's top leaders communicate with influence and lead with impact. Amy was named a rising star in the B&T Women in Media Awards, and she is a communications specialist with more than 10 years experience as a media advisor and public relations manager. So these girls are going to be really insightful to listen to. A registration link to join us next week will be open shortly, so keep an eye out on your email inboxes and also your socials for more. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate it. This recording will be made available shortly. We will have all of them available on our YouTube at the end of the series as well. So yeah, we'll be sending that through soon. Thank you again for attending, and we hopefully will see you next week.